The main text has been completed. Protagonist Wendy, plot flow warning, wind god warning for doing business, drinking alcohol carries risks, be cautious when getting drunk. Wendy, who had already started her fishing retirement mode, accidentally got drunk and fell on the windy ground. After waking up, I found that I had returned to the time when I had just obtained my humanoid form. Everything returns to its starting point, and we have to start from scratch again. Wendy. No. I finally started to retire. I thought it was just a matter of repeating past experiences, but who would have thought it would add so many difficulties? Wendy couldn't help but look up and shout, "Do Mond really have so many demons?" Lightning protection. 1. The main purpose of this book is to write about Wendy, who is doing the right thing. The protagonist is Wendy, who is the only one. The Micro-Emperor poem, CP or CB, is determined by oneself, has a flowing plot and private settings, such as defeating the demon god to accumulate divine power. 2. Although Wendy traveled 2,600 years ago, this book is not the original world, as the specific reasons will be mentioned in the text. During the War of Demons and Gods, the Eye of God appeared, so be cautious when entering. 4. Be cautious when entering inaccurate Tiwat history. 5. Be cautious in entering the party through textual research. Chapter 1. 2000 Years. In vain. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The temperature suddenly dropped, and Wendy, lying on the windy ground and peacefully sleeping in the gentle breeze, unconsciously sneezed. However, he, who was particularly tired, did not wake up. Instead, he huddled up and continued to sleep. Not knowing how long had passed, the piercing cold made Wendy shiver, and he quickly wanted to wrap his clothes tightly. I casually grabbed onto my body and only touched my smooth and cold skin. Wendy suddenly woke up and opened her eyes to find that she was not wearing any clothes. He immediately sat up and looked around, just as there was a blanket in the ruins beside him. Without much thought, he immediately wrapped it around his body. With a blanket, although it may not keep him warm, it can still barely withstand the cold. Wendy sat on the ruins huddled up and looked around. It was snowing heavily in the sky, and the piles on the ground looked very heavy. Not to mention the lack of people around, it was simply lifeless, not even a complete house, but more of a wreckage of buildings. The sight surprised Wendy greatly, and she immediately pinched her arm with her hand. The pain made him realize that it was not a dream. What's the situation? Why am I here? And where are my clothes? Wendy murmured to herself. After confirming that it was not a dream, Wendy also calmed down and carefully recalled what had happened before falling asleep. The cause was the Liu Lantern Festival, and Wendy had nothing to do before joining in the fun. At this joyful moment for the whole family, it was rare for Zhongli to not go to dinner with Hu Tao and the others, but to recite alone in the funeral hall, "I want to buy osmanthus flowers and carry wine." Wendy went straight to invite him to dinner. Although neither of them has any money, Zhongli's bill can be sent to the memorial hall. So, the two of them bought several jars of wine, brought a few dishes, and went to the outskirts of Liu Port to drink and enjoy lanterns. During this period, there were also some arguments because Wendy believed that her governance style was also among the best on the Tiwat continent. Zhongli said he was just an unreliable alcoholic poet. Fortunately, this small conflict did not escalate to the stage of the Twin Gods' War, and soon ended with the topic of reminiscing about the past. Wendy originally wanted to drink with her old friend until dawn, but to her surprise, Liu's wine was very strong. After a few drinks, Zhongli couldn't resist and returned to the Hall of Rebirth. Wendy, who had always been in large quantities, had to take the remaining wine back to Mond and drink it while walking, enjoying herself. And so he gracefully returned to Mond. He couldn't remember the rest of the story clearly, he only remembered that he seemed to have fallen asleep in the wind and woke up here. Can it be that the old man didn't argue and I deliberately teased me? No, he's such a serious person. It's possible for him to throw me into the snow, but he wouldn't even scratch my clothes. Wendy analyzed to herself, but before she could figure out what was going on, a cold wind seeped into the blanket, making him shiver all over. Although God cannot freeze to death, he will freeze stiff. So Wendy ignored the cold and walked barefoot in the snow, flipping through the ruins to find shelter from the cold. Fortunately, he had good luck and successfully found a cotton jacket. After drying it with wind elements, he put it on his body and flipped it over to wear a brand new pair of cotton shoes. At this point, he finally managed to finish his cold resistance work. Coincidentally, there was a fire fairy not far away, and Wendy immediately squatted near it. The warmth immediately spread throughout his body, causing his frozen brain to restart. At this moment, a crossbow arrow shot towards him at lightning speed from a distance. Wendy immediately drove the wind element to tear the crossbow and arrow apart. However, this movement alarmed the fairy and turned around, drifting away towards the distance. Without time to think about who shot the arrow at him, Wendy immediately shouted, "My fairy," and chased after the fairy. At this moment, the hunter hiding in the dark walked out in shock and stopped Wendy right in front of him. "Sorry. You squatted there, I thought you were a wild boar, but your skills are really good. I didn't even see clearly that the crossbow was broken by you." It's okay," Wendy said casually, her gaze still chasing the fairy. Seeing Wendy's eager pursuit of the fairy, the hunter immediately understood and smiled, saying, "I have set up a campsite near here and lit a fire. Do you want to go there and warm up, young man?" "Really? That's great." Wendy was very happy about the sudden invitation. "So you're so skilled, could you please help me hunt together? We can split it by 5 or 5. Wendy immediately agreed. As the god of wind, he could just use his little thumb to fight a wild boar. In his opinion, using this as an exchange was very valuable and profitable. Of course, if this hunter uncle can give Mora, he can also go back to Mond and have a good drink. Speaking of Mond, he also remembered the most important thing and immediately asked, "By the way, uncle, where is this? And how can Mond get there?" "Mond. This is Mond here." He observed the surroundings, feeling a bit familiar with the terrain, but couldn't remember where it was, so he tentatively asked, "Longji Snow Mountain." "What Dragon Ridge Snow Mountain?" "This is near Mond City, look." The hunter pointed to a building in the distance. Wendy turned her head and saw the dilapidated tower towering into the clouds in the distance. Just imagining it below felt a strong sense of oppression. At this moment, he remembered his friend who had died in the war, and his heart was somewhat sour. But soon, he realized something was wrong, and the melancholic expression on his face immediately disappeared. High towers and ice and snow. Why is this configuration so similar to 2,600 years ago? At this moment, the scene in front of me was like a series of bombs exploding wildly at Wendy. Wendy, covering her head in horror, carefully recalled that it seemed like she had traveled through time, but how could such a magical thing happen? At this moment, the missing memory from last night gradually came to mind. When he arrived at Mond, everything was fine at first, but when he returned to the windy place, he entered a state of clear but uncontrollable mind. At first, I just played the piano, sang and recited poetry. If I stopped here, I wouldn't be drunk and not wake up later. However, those who drank their heads didn't know what to stop, and Wendy picked up the jar and drank it all in one gulp. So, the direction of the matter gradually became eerie. I saw him suddenly kneeling in front of the statue of the wind god, raising his hands above his head and bowing earnestly, "May the wind god bless me." Then, as if suddenly enlightened, he rubbed his braids and muttered to himself, "It seems like I am the wind god." But immediately, he denied himself again and hugged the statue of the wind god, saying, "No. That Babatos guy has been away from Mond for several years and is not competent." The next second he slammed his head again and said, "No, my name is Babatos." In such a small theater, he acted alone with the 7 heavenly gods for 7 or 8 rounds. Finally, exhausted and lying under the statue, Wendy opened her eyes and looked at the statue, recalling the dispute with Zhongli just now. Suddenly, she laughed and said, "Humph, I want you to see how as the wind god, I make freedom and wine run through Mond." Speaking of this, he stumbled and climbed up to the statue again, holding it in his arms and shouting absent-mindedly, "Great wind god. Please give me a chance to prove it to Morax." At this point, his confused mind reconnected and murmured to himself, Why did I make a wish to myself again? Forget it, that's it." After speaking, he lay down under the statue and fell asleep. When I woke up again, I was already here. At that time, talking to herself about how happy the small theater was, Wendy now feels so overwhelmed. He grabbed his hair with a complex expression and collapsed, shouting, "What have I done all this?" His appearance frightened the hunter beside him, who crouched down and looked at him with concern, asking. However, at this moment Wendy had no intention of caring about him, and felt absurd in her heart. There was no god in this world who had fulfilled his wish to himself. If Zhongli knew about this, he would probably have laughed for thousands of years. However, upon careful consideration, his ability to travel back is simply beyond his ability, which is absolutely unrelated to his divine power. Just going back 2,600 years ago doesn't mean that all his efforts over the years have been in vain. "Little young man, are you okay?" Hunter Uncle asked inexplicably as he looked at his collapsed appearance. Wendy lifted her head and said with a sorrowful expression and words, "Uncle, you shot 100 wild boars, prepared for a year, but woke up when you didn't even have any tools. What would you do?" "If I were to say that, I would probably die of anger." Chapter 2. Sideline is the wind god. You are listening at novel full.audio. De co lois ara trong quatrin lay text. Chapter 3. Avalanche. It's okay, there's the wind god. You are listening at novel full.audio. De co lois ara trong quatrin lay text. Chapter 4. I am Babatos Dog. You are listening at novel full.audio. De co lois ara trong quatrin lay text. Chapter 5. Make a bet, Morax wins. You are listening at novel full.audio. De co lois ara trong quatrin lay text. Chapter 6. Writing pranks into poetry. You are listening at novel full.audio. De co lois ara trong quatrin lay text. Chapter 7. Strange side effects. You are listening at novel full.audio. De co lois ara trong quatrin lay text. Chapter 8. Fengshen. Or Mom. You are listening at novel full.audio. De co lois ara trong quatrin lay text. Chapter 9. Feigning illness. Easy. You are listening at novel full.audio. De co lois ara trong quatrin lay text. Chapter 10. Successful infiltration. You are listening at novel full.audio. De co lois ara trong quatrin lay text.